Another example, a fictional example from Hollywood movies. If you think about ghost movies, there's a phenomenon that happens in almost all ghost movies. I'm not a big fan of ghost movies. Maybe that's because the 5 or 6 that I've seen have all been B or C grade horror or ghost type movies, and they all seem to have the same kind of plot. So here's the stereotypical plot of the ghost movie. Boy and girl, teenagers, they're in love with each other, dating each other, and so there's some sort of spooky phenomena that is happening in their town. They decide that they're going to investigate it. So a lot of this stuff seems to be centered on this spooky house on the outskirts of town. So they show up there at midnight and they're going to investigate, right, whatever the spooky phenomenon is. And of course they show up at the front door, and it's a dark and stormy night, and they say things to each other like, I thought you were going to bring the flashlights. Neither of them came prepared, so then they go into the house, they decide they're going to investigate, so everything is scary and creaky, and then they say, let's split up, right? And the boy says, I will check the downstairs, and the girl says, I will check the upstairs, so they split up. The girl, then we follow her up the creaky stairs, down the creaky hall. She opens the door to the bedroom where the murder was thought to have occurred, and the door creaks, and then she goes into the bedroom and then back toward the other end of the room. She sees the ghost sees her, their eyes meet, the girl screams, she turns around and runs out the door, and she slams the door behind her. Now then, she goes tearing off down the hall, the camera cuts to the ghost, and we see the ghost, and this is perfectly appropriate on dualistic grounds, just sails right through the door and continues to chase the girl down the hallway. And that's appropriate. The ghost is, as dualism describes it, a non-physical phenomenon, so it can't interact or be interacted with by physical phenomenon, so the door is in no way an obstacle to it. And so the girl runs down the stairs, and as I remember, she tore through the dining room, she slammed that door, the ghost sailed right through it, she tore into the kitchen, slammed that door, the ghost has her caught in the kitchen, there's nowhere for her to run, so she starts throwing things at it. She throws a breadboard, a colander, knives, right, and so forth. And of course all of these things just go through the ghost's body, right, so to speak, and all of that is perfectly appropriate on dualistic grounds since the physical stuff can't interact with the dualistic stuff. So finally, the ghost gets the girl trapped in the corner, and the ghost reaches down with his hand and picks up the knife and stabs her to death. And that's cheating, right, in that particular ghost movie, because ghosts don't really have hands, and even if they did have ghostly hands, whatever those would be, the hand is a spiritual phenomenon, and it shouldn't be capable then of picking up a heavy phenomenon, physical phenomenon like a knife, let alone stabbing it into a physical body of the girl. So that's the problem. If dualism is true, as classically explained, how can we explain one of the core phenomena that we're supposed to be explaining if we're developing an account of human nature, and that is that the intimate interplay between the psychological and the physical is omnipresent in our lives. All right, third issue. Issue C, as I will call it here. This is the modern one. In many cases, the naturalists who were dissatisfied with dualist theories in the early modern world or in the ancient world would recognize these as problems for dualism, but they were not often very convincing in developing naturalistic alternatives. It wasn't until the development in the 19th century of evolutionary theory, most famously associated with Charles Darwin, published in his work, Origin of Species in 1859. Darwin had actually worked it out a couple of decades earlier, but he was a more shy, timid kind of person and knew that the theory would evoke a firestorm. He did not want to subject himself to that. So it wasn't until the 1850s when someone else independently came across the same idea, a man named Alfred Wallace, that Darwin decided he should publish his work. And of course, a firestorm did ensue as a result of that. And the reason that the firestorm erupted is important issues obviously are at stake here. And then for the first time, the scientific community has developed a plausible account for, in purely naturalistic terms, all of the significant and substantial properties of the human being on evolutionary grounds. And so if evolutionary theory is true, then the human being, with all of its magnificent psychological properties, is part and parcel of the natural world, and ultimately we will be explaining the power of our psychological thoughts and emotions and so forth, in terms of the fact that we have a larger brain that either just is those thoughts in action, or that larger brain supports certain emergent properties, emergent psychological causal powers that we call thoughts and emotions that then themselves can act on the physical world in their own right. Evolutionary theory then is, I think, for all of the modern naturalistic approaches that I'm aware of, the foundation for their approaches, whether they are integrationist or whether they are reductive materialist. And so that's the positive basis for their theory. These two problems, A and B, are their primary criticisms, rather, of the dualistic approach. And then certainly in turn, the dualists are highly critical of evolutionary theory and need to attack it whenever possible. And then we're into the standard debates between the more creationist model of human origins and the evolutionary model that's a big part of our intellectual life now in the 21st century. And certainly that's an issue that has important implications for what we teach in the classroom.